the literal visible return of Jesus Christ. As he descends on the clouds of heaven, every eye sees the Prince of Life. And this is Seventh-day Adventists believe, page 333. So I'm using their information to show you what they believe, and we agree with that. We agree that every eye will see him. Let's look at how it all began. Let's look at the very foundation, the very beginning of Seventh-day Adventists. Modern Seventh-day Adventists traces its origins back to the early 1800s with Mr. William Miller, and he lived from 1782 to 1849. Miller had converted from deism to Christianity in 1816, and then joined a Baptist church, later becoming a pastor in a Baptist church. And Miller spent a lot of time studying the scriptures, and he was really intrigued about the return of Christ. He studied the imminent return of Jesus Christ. He used Daniel 8:14 as a tool to calculate the return of Christ. That was, Jim, his first mistake. Because we're not supposed to know the day or the hour that he comes back. Jesus made that very clear in the studies, in the Gospels. And so his attempt to find out was something that I believe went beyond a desire that God had placed in our heart to be ready. To be ready, you don't need to know the date. You're ready every day. I tell the Bible college students jokingly, but in truth, be ready to pray, preach, or die at a moment's notice. And if you're ready to pray, preach, or die at a moment's notice, then you're ready for the return of the Lord. You're ready for his return. And so he used Daniel 8:14 to do his calculations. This is a verse that he used. Unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed, Daniel 8:14. And Miller interpreted the cleansing of the sanctuary as the earth's purification by fire at Christ's second coming. So he took these dates, he took this information, and he started calculating as to when the Lord would be coming back. He became convinced that the 2,300 days, the period which is stated, started in 457 BC with the decree to rebuild Jerusalem by Artaxerxes I, Artaxerxes I of Persia. Now, simple calculation then revealed, it was simple math, but simple math can be so simply wrong. It's simple math then revealed he would return in 1844. So then the Millerites, the group of people that started to believe that, started to spread that teaching that Jesus Christ was coming back in 1844. And what is the problem when you set a date? It's going to be proven right or wrong.
Yes.
It's going to be proven right or wrong. Miller records, I was thus brought to the solemn conclusion that in about 25 years from that time, 1818, all the affairs of our present state would be wound up. Now, if you've only got 20-some years left, you can build a church real quick. Because you're telling the people, look, I could show you through calculations. That's one of the problems I have with the Bible code. The hidden messages and hidden numbers and calculations, and there's no set formula. But all of a sudden it says, well, the assassination of John F. Kennedy is found in the scriptures. You go to I was going to say Hezekiah, they probably did. Book of Hezekiah, they went to the Old Testament, found a book, started counting here, counting there, grabbed that letter here, and there's no set formula. But they found these things. And so he's got this absolute conviction that Jesus Christ is coming back in 48, I think it was? All right. The interest in the return of Christ was growing from that day to today. As a result, thousands of Millerites accepted his idea that Jesus would return in the year covering 1843 to 1844. So in that area would be the return of Jesus Christ. And what you see on the picture, and I would have blown it up, but I could not find anywhere a good picture that I could get blown up that you'd be able to read the intricacies on that picture. But that actually was a chart that was used by the Millerites and later on adopted by the Seventh-day Adventists. Of course, his prophecies did not come to pass. Instead of giving up, he merely adjusted the figures. And we see that with the Jehovah's Witnesses. They kept on readjusting the figures. Jesus will come back and readjust the figures.
Look at the man, what was it, last year that made the prediction and that he was going to come on a certain day. I don't remember even what it was now, but of course we refuted it, and
Absolutely.
so he redid the scriptures, and so they
came up with
continued
another figure.
Yeah, another figure.
Or when they wrote a book, 88 Reasons Why Christ is Coming Back in 1988.
Yeah.
He did not come back. He wrote in 1989, 89 reasons he would come back in 89. And people went and bought the book.
Yeah.
Shame on them. All right. So New Day would be March 21st, 1844. And then later, October 22nd, 1844. So now we have 3 dates that he picked. When these dates also failed, Miller quit setting dates. That was the wisest thing he could do at that point in time. Just quit setting dates on the return of Jesus Christ. He will come back when it's determined by God in heaven. Now, I want to go to a sound clip. I want you a sound bite. I want you to look at this as we look at what is referred to as the Great Disappointment.
An explanation for the 1844 disappointment had to be found. 2 Millerites, Hiram Edson and Mr. Crozier, introduced a new sanctuary theology, which taught that instead of Christ coming visibly to earth in 1844, he entered for the first time the most holy place in heaven. This new teaching gave them a way out of their dilemma without actually admitting their error. Ellen G. White immediately put God's endorsement on this new explanation for the date October 22nd, 1844.
The Lord shewed me in vision more than 1 year ago that Brother Crozier had the true light of the cleansing of the sanctuary.
All doctrines were soon adjusted to fit 1844 as the cleansing of the sanctuary and the beginning of the investigative judgment. The shut door had to be opened to allow salvation for their own children who had been born after 1844 and to evangelize others into Adventism. Salvation for everyone, even those who lived in Bible times, had to be conditional on this judgment, and so soul sleep was introduced. The prophecies of Daniel and Revelation had to be reinterpreted to fit the investigative judgment. It was a time of turmoil and doctrinal reversal, but the investigative judgment doctrine survived with Ellen White's stamp of approval.
Well, that was quick.
Isn't that something? Isn't that something?
Wow.
And they believe, and what they say is this: on the morning following, this is the morning after what they call the Great Disappointment of October 22nd, 1844. Hiram Edison claimed to have had this vision from God. And he saw Jesus standing at the altar of heaven and concluded that Miller had been right on the date, just wrong on the location. In other words, Jesus came to cleanse the temple, but not the temple down, not the earth down here, but a temple which is in heaven. Edison concluded that Jesus' return was not to the earth, but into a heavenly sanctuary in which he would cleanse that sanctuary. Now, he influenced a lot of other people because a lot of people had placed their faith. Now, if you can imagine you placing everything you have on a belief, and as what usually happens, and I'm not sure it definitely happened there, but it usually happens when you believe that Jesus is coming back on a set date, then what usually happens is this: you stop working, you stop paying bills, you stop doing the regular things because you say, hey, it don't matter. You give away everything.
Yeah, sell it or give away or whatever. Yeah.
So now everything's invested in this one date. When it doesn't happen, your pride is hurt. Now, some people would have just got upset and just said, hey, I don't want anything to do with the Millerites. I don't want anything to do with Seventh-day. I don't want anything to do with any kind of revelation. I'm walking away from this. Then you'll have those that will say, there's got to be a reason. There's got to be a reason. There's got to be a reason why that prophecy didn't come to pass. And I believe that's what happened here. Joseph Bates, who lived 1792 to 1872, began to promote Edson's revelation that Jesus had entered a heavenly sanctuary. And he published a pamphlet which greatly influenced James and Ellen White. Now here we see a picture of James and Ellen. You can almost see an Amish look about James. That's her husband. But they both became teachers at the very beginning and worked hard to promote the teaching. These three were the driving force behind the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Now let's look at some of her visions. Again, remember, early Seventh-day Adventists said that she was a prophetess. the traditional Seventh-day Adventists still hold her as a prophet. The more liberal, the progressive, distance himself from some of her visions. Okay. Shortly after the Great Disappointment, she claimed to see a vision of a narrow path where an angel was guiding Adventists into their travel. Not Christians, Adventists. I'm not saying they're not Christians, but I'm saying she made a very clear point that it wasn't helping all those who were calling themselves Christians. Matter of fact, she said that those who did not believe in the 1844, she said, would be condemned. So here, she's making a distinction here. Subsequent visions resulted in interpretations of the three angels in Revelation 14:6-11 as revealing the 1843 and 1844 as the hour of God's judgment, the fall of Babylon, and those are Adventists leaving various churches, and Revelation supporting Sabbath worship. And that's not what it says. It's not even close to what it says. But this is how she interpreted it. Seventh-day Adventists claim Ellen White as a genuine prophetess. They commonly refer to her as the Lord's messenger to the church. That's a pretty strong title, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
The Lord's messenger for the church. So they place a lot of faith, a lot of faith on what she teaches. Seventh-day Adventists say Ellen White's writings are not an addition to the Bible, but are just as inspired as the books of the Bible. Let me say that again, because if it doesn't trouble you, you didn't hear it right.
Right.
Seventh-day Adventists say Ellen White's writings are not an addition to the Bible, but are just as inspired as the books of the Bible.
And
that is very troubling.
Yes, Mormonism
says the same thing.
Yes.
Jehovah's Witness says you can't interpret the Bible without our help. You got to have reason from Scripture from Charles Taze Russell.
Roman
Right.
Catholicism says the same thing.
Exact same
Only
thing.
the priest can really interpret the Bible. You don't have the right or the
You don't have the
knowledge
ability.
or the
Yeah,
ability.
you'll be led astray if you try to interpret the Bible without their interpretation. They say Adventists have but one creed, the Bible and the Bible alone. That's good. I agree with that. Sola Scriptura. That's from Seventh-day Adventist Belief, page, this is the intro, page 8. Yet some make Ellen G. White's writings equal to the Bible. Now, this is from John R. Robertson, The White Truth. What we are as a church is a reflection of our faith in the divine authority evident in the writings of Ellen G. White. Now, this is a Seventh-day Adventist. This is a person who has grown up learning their doctrines, walking their doctrines, knowledgeable enough to write a book on it. And he says very clearly, what we are as a church is a reflection of our faith in divine authority evident in the writings of Ellen G. White. Now, I spent 2 years in a cult. And Sister Swagger, when God delivered me from that cult, God told me, do not place your salvation in another man's hands again. And I remember one day, we were on the radio program, and that day you had your husband as a guest, and I turned to Brother Swagger and I said, God told me never to put my salvation. I don't put my salvation under your hands. And Brother Swagger wisely said, nor should you.
Right.
My salvation is my faith
right.
in Jesus Christ. I'm a part of this church. God has called me to be part of this church. I believe what God is doing in this church. But my salvation is not tied to a building nor to an organization.
Right.
Amen?
Amen.